My parents always taught me that a girl had to be independent. They were getting old, and it was time for me to shoulder the family's burdens. That I remember pointing at my brother, Austin, and saying naively, "But we have Austin. He should learn to be independent too." Not long after that, Austin had a terrible fall. He became completely bedridden. I worked part-time jobs while taking care of my paralyzed brother, yet our family still survived on discarded vegetables and wore second-hand clothes rescued from the trash.To make more money. I signed up for sketchy, under-the-table medical drug trials, but because of that, I developed severe skin cancer. My body began to rot. Without hesitation, I left every single dollar of that blood money to Austin. I didn't even keep enough cash to buy a bottle of sleeping pills for myself. In the end, I pulled a plastic trash bag over my head and ended my own life. Yet, after my death, I saw Austin playing in a high-stakes championship basketball game. When it ended, my parents rushed to hug him and gifted him the most expensive mansion in the city.It. Turned out they had staged this entire tragedy of poverty. I was the only actor who took the script seriously, but now that I'm actually dead, why do they look so full of regret? I was preparing for my second drug trial. The nurse, about to insert the needle, froze when she saw the massive rotting sores on my arm. She gasped, her hands shaking so hard that the syringe dropped to the floor. They rushed me in for a full medical examination. Before I could even ask about the rotting skin, they dragged me out and threw me onto the street. The nurse threw my cash and the medical report right at my face. "You have skin cancer and you still dared to come for drug trials? How desperate for money are you? You signed the waiver, so even if you died on our table, it's on you. Take the money and get the hell out. Don't you dare try to sue us." Those words hit me like a lightning bolt. I froze on the pavement. Ever since the trial started, my skin had been incredibly itchy and flaky. Every time Sarah struggled to sweep up the dry skin from my bedsheets, I felt so incredibly guilty that I never imagined it was the prelude to my death. Dejected, I picked up the report and stared at the bold letters, desperately wishing my eyes were playing tricks on me. Just then, my phone buzzed. Sarah's gentle voice echoed in my ear. "Chloe, we're working extra hours for some cash today and won't make it back for lunch. Remember to cook for Austin." I swallowed my tears and choked out a quiet, "Okay." My feet felt like lead as I walked back home. Seeing Austin lying on the bed, I immediately shoved the medical report under my wooden cot. But looking at him, my eyes welled up with tears. Austin looked at me and whispered, "I'm sorry, Chloe. I'm holding you back. Honestly, it's fine if I skip lunch." I walked over and sat by his bed for a long time before I could find my voice. "Austin, what will you do if I'm not here one day?" Austin gently patted my head, his eyes full of affection. "What are you talking about? I'd die for you before I let anything happen to you. You're going to be fine. We just have to stay strong. Things will get better soon." But I wasn't going to get better. I stood up, wiped my tears, and did something I never did. I bought some fresh eggs to boil for Austin. As soon as the food was on the table, David and Sarah dragged their exhausted bodies through the door. They pulled a bunch of bruised, discarded lettuce leaves from their tattered canvas bags. David took a big gulp of cold tap water, looking excited. Sarah was so fast today. She grabbed these from the supermarket dumpster before anyone else. "They're fresher than usual." I looked at them, but my mind was completely blank. Sarah pulled a gourmet cupcake from her bag and placed it in my hand. "It's your birthday today. We can't afford a cake, but you should still have something sweet." I held the heavy, beautifully frosted cupcake, but I couldn't bring myself to smile. The words from the medical report kept spinning in my head. The sweet aroma of the frosting snapped me back to reality. I placed the cupcake in front of Austin. "Give it to Austin. I don't really like sweets." Austin pushed my hand back. "It's your birthday, Chloe. You eat it. I'll just take a tiny taste of the frosting to celebrate." Saying that, he dipped his finger in the frosting and licked it. That a gourmet cupcake like this cost as much as our grocery budget for a week. No matter what, I couldn't swallow it. David and Sarah sat down at the table, gnawing on stale, yellowed bread. They refused to touch the boiled eggs I made. Looking at their mismatched, oversized clothes rescued from thrift store dumpsters, my heart ached with agonizing pain. The terror of knowing I was going to die was slowly washed away by sheer pity for my family. That I wanted to beg my parents for comfort, but I chose to keep my mouth shut about the cancer. If my death meant one less mouth to feed, and if it could make their lives easier, then I was willing to die. I was preparing for my second drug trial. The nurse, about to insert the needle, froze when she saw the massive rotting sores on my arm. She gasped, her hands shaking so hard that the syringe dropped to the floor. They rushed me in for a full medical examination. Before I could even ask about the rotting skin, they dragged me out and threw me onto the street. The nurse threw my cash and the medical report right at my face. "You have skin cancer and you still dared to come for drug trials? How desperate for money are you? You signed the waiver, so even if you died on our table, it's on you. Take the money and get the hell out. Don't you dare try to sue us." Those words hit me like a lightning bolt. I froze on the pavement. Ever since the trial started, my skin had been incredibly itchy and flaky. Every time Sarah struggled to sweep up the dry skin from my bedsheets, I felt so incredibly guilty that I never imagined it was the prelude to my death. Dejected, I picked up the report and stared at the bold letters, desperately wishing my eyes were playing tricks on me. Just then, my phone buzzed. Sarah's gentle voice echoed in my ear. "Chloe, we're working extra hours for some cash today and won't make it back for lunch. Remember to cook for Austin." I swallowed my tears and choked out a quiet, "Okay." My feet felt like lead as I walked back home, seeing Austin lying on the bed. I immediately shoved the medical report under my wooden cot, but looking at him, my eyes welled up with tears. Austin looked at me and whispered, "I'm sorry, Chloe. I'm holding you back. Honestly, it's fine if I skip lunch." I walked over and sat by his bed for a long time before I could find my voice. "Austin, what will you do if I'm not here one day?" Austin gently patted my head, his eyes full of affection. "What are you talking about? I'd die for you before I let anything happen to you. You're going to be fine. We just have to stay strong. Things will get better soon." But I wasn't going to get better. I stood up, wiped my tears, and did something I never did. I bought some fresh eggs to boil for Austin.A. As soon as the food was on the table, David and Sarah dragged their exhausted bodies through the door. They pulled a bunch of bruised, discarded lettuce leaves from their tattered canvas bags. David took a big gulp of cold tap water, looking excited. Sarah was so fast today. She grabbed these from the supermarket dumpster before anyone else. "They're fresher than usual." I looked at them, but my mind was completely blank. Sarah pulled a gourmet cupcake from her bag and placed it in my hand. "It's your birthday today. We can't afford a cake, but you should still have something sweet." I held the heavy, beautifully frosted cupcake, but I couldn't bring myself to smile. The words from the medical report kept spinning in my head. The sweet aroma of the frosting snapped me back to reality. I placed the cupcake in front of Austin. "Give it to Austin. I don't really like sweets." Austin pushed my hand back. "It's your birthday, Chloe. You eat it. I'll just take a tiny taste of the frosting to celebrate." Saying that, he dipped his finger in the frosting and licked it. That a gourmet cupcake like this cost as much as our grocery budget for a week. No matter what, I couldn't swallow it. David and Sarah sat down at the table, gnawing on stale, yellowed bread. They refused to touch the boiled eggs I made. Looking at their mismatched, oversized clothes rescued from thrift store dumpsters, my heart ached with agonizing pain. The terror of knowing I was going to die was slowly washed away by sheer pity for my family. That I wanted to beg my parents for comfort, but I chose to keep my mouth shut about the cancer. If my death meant one less mouth to feed, and if it could make their lives easier, then I was willing to die. When I woke up again, I felt weightless. When I saw a stiff, pale version of myself lying on the cot, I finally realized I was dead. That I floated closer. My face was a sickly blue. Already malnourished, I looked even uglier in death, but my only thought was, how is Austin doing? As that thought consumed me, I suddenly vanished and reappeared at a basketball court. Before I could process why my ghost was teleporting, I saw David and Sarah sitting in the VIP stands, beaming with joy. They were wearing expensive, designer clothes. Even if our family had saved for a lifetime, we couldn't have afforded a single sleeve of those outfits. That I floated in front of them, but they looked like total strangers. Sarah's bright red lipstick was striking, and her perfectly styled blonde waves made her look exactly like a wealthy socialite. Confused, I followed their gaze down to the court. There, I saw my paralyzed brother, Austin, running and dribbling the ball with incredible agility. That I recognized the jersey he was wearing. It was a limited edition designer brand that money could barely buy. My mind spun. Suddenly, the buzzer sounded. David and Sarah rushed onto the court, throwing their arms around Austin with pure adoration. "Austin. We didn't spend all those years taking you around the world for nothing." But Austin was paralyzed. How did he travel the world? Even in my confusion, seeing him healthy made me ecstatic. "Austin. You're okay? How did you get better?" But no matter how loud I screamed, they didn't react. Austin hugged Sarah. "Mom, I was going crazy pretending to be paralyzed for so long. Thank God I could use those doctor visits as an excuse to travel and actually stretch my legs." David and Sarah cupped his face, overflowing with affection. "You've worked so hard, son. Today, we have a gift for you." David pulled out a deed. It was for a luxury mansion in the city's most exclusive gated community. That I remembered that place. I had stood outside its gates once, staring in awe. Back then, Sarah had told me, "We won't be poor forever, Chloe. If you work hard, you'll live in a house like this one day." But it turned out they didn't need to work hard. They already owned it. Austin seemed to remember something and looked at them. "By the way, Chloe was crying when she got home yesterday. Did something happen to her?" Sarah instantly looked tense and grabbed his arm. "You didn't blow your cover, did you? Our plan is almost complete. We can't let it ruin now." Austin shook his head. "Don't worry. I've played the part this long, I won't disappoint you. But I still feel like Chloe is hiding something." Sarah nodded, telling him not to overthink it. She said they would check on me when they got back. Full of questions, I followed them back to the mansion. The villa was blindingly bright, filled with maids rushing around. Someone even held out slippers for them, and the dining table was piled high with expensive delicacies. It turned out today was Austin's engagement party. They had invited high society's finest. Sarah stood next to David, whispering, "Chloe has been acting strange lately. She used to be so full of positive energy. And she handed me so much cash before we left. You don't think she got it illegally, do you?" David wrapped an arm around her, speaking patiently. "No way. We raised her to be independent, and her morals are solid. Besides, Austin's career is stable now, and Chloe is graduating in a few days. On Austin's wedding day, we'll tell her the truth. She's inheriting a multi-million-dollar company right out of college. She'll probably think she's dreaming. Standing beside them, my tears fell silently onto the marble floor. David, Sarah. I won't be smiling. And I'm never waking up. Asterisk. The engagement party was a massive success, and they set the wedding date for a week later. After waving goodbye to the guests, David and Sarah pulled out their phones, looking slightly anxious. We'll be busy planning the wedding this week, so we can't go back to the old place. We should call Chloe and let her know. Sarah dialed my number eagerly, but it just kept ringing. I floated next to her, wanting to tell her I was right there, but my hand passed right through her shoulder. I could never hug her again. I recalled smelling expensive perfume on them back in the trailer park. They had always lied, saying they just ran into some rich ladies. I recalled the photos Sarah sent me. They were far too high quality to have been taken on her cheap, cracked phone, and Austin. His legs had remained muscular and toned despite supposedly being paralyzed for years. It was all just a sick game of poverty, and I was the only actor who didn't know it was a script. My grief suffocated me. But looking at their happy faces, a part of me felt relieved that if they were living well, I didn't have to worry anymore. After a long time, I floated upstairs. At the end of the hallway was a bedroom that I walked in. The layout was incredibly familiar. It was decorated exactly like the dream room I had sketched in my notebook years ago. On the nightstand was a framed photo of the 4 of us.My school trophies and certificates from childhood were neatly arranged on the desk. Just then, a cat wandered into the room. Even the cat was the exact breed I had drawn. They remembered every single dream I had. They had built it all for me. This room was a beautiful fairy tale, but I could only watch. I could never touch it. Loud footsteps echoed in the hallway. I turned around. Several personal stylists in sharp suits walked in, holding a row of gorgeous designer gowns. David, Sarah, and Austin stood before the outfits. Our suits are ready. Now, let's choose Chloe's dress. This will be our big surprise for her. Looking at the price tags, each dress cost more than I used to earn in a year of grueling labor. Now, a whole rack of them was mine. Austin picked up a stunning blue gown with a long train. This blue one is perfect for Chloe. She's so fair, she'll look like royalty in this. David shook his head. He pulled out a white tulle gown. No, Chloe should wear this one. When she was little, she would stare at the dolls in the boutique window for hours. She'll love the tulle. Austin stared at the rack for a moment, then grabbed a pastel pink gown. You guys still don't get Chloe. Pink is her absolute favorite. She's wanted pink things since she was a toddler. But light colors get dirty too easily. To save money, she always forced herself to choose dark, ugly clothes. Her classmates used to call her a cheap, dirty peasant because of it. David and Sarah looked pained, exchanging a sad look before agreeing with Austin. In the blink of an eye, it was Austin's wedding day. They had been too busy to check on me all week. On the morning of the wedding, Sarah happily sent the family chauffeur to fetch me. She whispered to the driver, "When you get there, don't tell her who sent you. We want to give her the surprise of her life." The driver nodded and sped off to the trailer park to pick up the secret heiress. But after hours of waiting, I never arrived. Instead, the chauffeur burst through the mansion doors, his face pale with horror. "Ma'am. Sir, something terrible has happened. The trailer is surrounded by police. Chloe is dead." The crystal champagne flute slipped from Sarah's hand, shattering on the polished Italian marble. For a long, agonizing second, the only sound in the grand foyer of the mansion was the soft, rhythmic hum of the central air conditioning and the distant, muffled laughter of wedding guests out on the manicured lawn. Austin's bride, Clara, stood near the grand staircase, her hand-embroidered veil floating around her like a cloud. "Arthur," David said, his voice dropping into a register that was dangerously quiet. He stepped forward, his leather shoes clicking sharply. He adjusted the lapel of his bespoke tuxedo, though his hand had begun to tremble. "What did you just say?" The chauffeur, Arthur, was sweating through his uniform. He didn't look at David. He couldn't. His eyes were fixed on the shattered glass and the pooling champagne at Sarah's feet. The trailer, sir," Arthur stammered, his voice cracking. "The police have cordoned off the entire alleyway. They wouldn't let me get close. I told them I was there to pick up Chloe, and the officer looked at my license plate, saw the luxury car, and got angry. He told me the girl inside had been dead for at least 3 days. He said she suffocated." "No," Sarah whispered. She took a step back, her heel grinding a shard of crystal into the marble. "No, that's impossible. We were just talking about her. We bought her the pink dress. We bought the white tulle. She's supposed to be here. She's graduating in 3 days. It's a prank. Chloe is playing a trick on us because we left her there for so long." "Mom," Austin said, stepping forward. He was still wearing his tailored wedding suit, the fabric stretched tight over his athletic, muscular shoulders, the shoulders of a champion basketball player, not a bedridden invalid. His face had gone entirely bloodless. "Chloe doesn't play pranks. You know she doesn't. She doesn't have the spirit for it. She's fine." Sarah suddenly shrieked, the high society poise she had cultivated for years vaporizing in an instant. She's waiting for us. She's probably just angry because we didn't call her this week. David, tell him. Tell Arthur he's mistaken. David didn't answer. He was already moving. He pushed past the chauffeur, nearly knocking him over, and ran toward the front doors. I floated right behind him. It was a strange sensation, being dead. I felt no cold, no heat, and no pain. The agonizing itch that had plagued my skin for months was entirely gone. For the first time in years, my joints didn't ache from 12-hour shifts at the restaurant, and my throat didn't burn from the cheap, chemical fumes of the factory where I worked night shifts. I felt light, weightless. But as I watched my father sprint toward his black Mercedes, leaving his guests and his sons waiting behind, a cold, heavy lump of dread settled in the space where my heart used to be. Why are they running? I thought, hovering over the passenger seat as David slammed his foot onto the gas. Why do they look like their world is ending? They have everything. They have the mansion, the money, the healthy son. I was the only broken thing in their lives. Why does my death matter so much to them now? The Mercedes tore through the gates of the exclusive community, tires screaming against the asphalt. Austin and Sarah were in the back seat. Sarah was clutching her pearl necklace so tightly that the string snapped, sending dozens of expensive, perfect spheres bouncing across the leather seats. No one bothered to pick them up. As the car neared the slums on the outskirts of the city, the scenery changed with brutal rapidity. The wide, tree-lined boulevards gave way to narrow, cracked asphalt. The towering glass skyscrapers shrank into rusted, corrugated iron roofs and leaning wooden telephone poles tangled with black wires. This was my world. The world they had built for me. When the car finally screeched to a halt at the entrance of the narrow alleyway, it couldn't go any further. The path was too narrow, blocked by two blue and red flashing police cruisers and a coroner's van. David threw the door open and stumbled out into the mud. His handmade leather shoes sank into the gray, stagnant water of a puddle. Sarah followed, her heavy silk gown dragging through the filth, collecting grease and dirt along the hem. Hey! You can't be back here, a young police officer shouted, stepping forward to block them. This is an active investigation scene. Get back behind the tape. My daughter, David gasped, his chest heaving. My daughter lives in that trailer. Chloe Vance. The officer's expression shifted instantly. The annoyance on his face hardened into something cold, critical, and deeply disgusted. He looked at David's tuxedo, then at Sarah's designer gown and the diamonds glittering at her ears. And finally at Austin, who was standing behind them, looking tall, healthy, and terrified. You're Chloe Vance's family? The officer asked, his voice dripping with venom. Yes. Yes, we are. Sarah cried, trying to push past him. Where is she? Let me see her. She's just throwing a tantrum, isn't she? She's trying to punish us. A tantrum? The officer let out a harsh, humorless laugh. Ma'am, your daughter is dead. She's been dead for days. And looking at the state of this place, and the state of you, I suggest you prepare yourselves. Though, frankly, I don't think you deserve to. Before David could demand what he meant, two paramedics emerged from the door of our rusted, leaning trailer. They were carrying a black canvas body bag on a stretcher. Chloe! Sarah screamed, lunging forward. This time, the officer didn't stop her. Perhaps he wanted her to see. Sarah threw herself onto the stretcher, her manicured hands tearing at the heavy zipper of the body bag. Wake up. Chloe, stop this. The joke is over. Look, we brought the car. We brought your brother. He can walk, Chloe. See? He's not sick. It was all a test. We wanted you to be strong. We wanted you to earn your inheritance. The zipper gave way. The stench hit them first. It wasn't just the smell of decay, it was the sickening, sweet smell of rotting flesh mixed with cheap plastic. Sarah froze. David stopped breathing. Austin took a step back and violently threw up into the mud. Inside the bag lay my body. I looked terrible. Because I had been malnourished for years, my cheeks were hollowed out, my collarbones protruding like sharp knives beneath my paper-thin second-hand shirt. But it was my face and arms that made Sarah let out a sound. That didn't sound human. My face was a bloated, dark shade of purple blue, my eyes half open and glassy, staring blankly at the gray sky. A thick, clear plastic trash bag was still loosely crumpled around my neck, though the police had cut it open to check for Signs of life. But it was my arms that drew the most horror. Both of my arms, from the wrists to the shoulders, were covered in massive, weeping, black and purple sores. The skin had literally split open, rotting away, to reveal the yellow fat and dark muscle beneath. It looked as though I had been burned or eaten alive by some horrific parasite. What is this? David whispered, his knees buckling. He fell into the mud beside his wife. What happened to her skin? Why does she look like this? We were hoping you could tell us, a detective said, stepping out from the trailer. He was holding a clear plastic evidence bag. Inside was a crumpled sheet of paper and a rusted metal biscuit tin. We found these inside, the detective said, his eyes scanning the wealthy family with deep contempt. Along with her body. The neighborhood says this girl worked 3 jobs. They said she used to dig through the supermarket dumpster at night to find bruised vegetables for her starving parents and paralyzed brother. They said she wore clothes she found in the trash. The detective stepped closer, holding up the plastic bag containing the biscuit tin. Inside this tin, she left $64,000 in cash. Every single bill is stained with dirt, grease, or what looks like dried blood. And there was a note. The detective pulled out a piece of paper. He didn't read it out loud. Instead, he handed it to David. David's hands shook so violently he almost dropped it. Sarah leaned over his shoulder, her tear-stained face pale as ash. The handwriting was mine. It was shaky, written with a cheap, leaking ballpoint pen on the back of a flyer for a soup kitchen. To Austin. I'm sorry I couldn't save more. The clinic stopped letting me do the trials. Because my skin started rotting, and they said I was too high risk. I wanted to get you to $80,000 for the surgery, but $64,000 is all I could manage. Please use this to buy your medicine. Please walk again. Mom, Dad. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough. I tried to be independent. I tried to shoulder the burden. But my body hurts so much. I can't sleep anymore because the skin on my back is gone. I don't want to be a burden to you anymore. If I'm gone, there's one less mouth to feed. You can use my share of the food to buy Austin some fresh eggs. I love you all so much. Don't be sad. I'm finally not tired anymore. Chloe. No. Sarah sobbed, her chest heaving as she clawed at the muddy ground. No. No, no. Chloe. We have billions. We own the largest shipping conglomerate in the country. Austin wasn't sick. We paid the doctors to fake the reports. We just wanted you to learn not to rely on us. We wanted you to be a survivor. Austin fell to his knees beside his mother, his hands covering his face as dry, racking sobs tore through his body. I told her I was paralyzed, he whispered, his voice choked with horror. Every time she came home, I pretended I couldn't move. She used to carry me to the bathroom, Mom. She was so small, and she would strain her back carrying me because she thought I couldn't walk. And I just lay there. I went to Paris last month while she was eating trash. The police officer and the detective exchanged a look of sheer, unadulterated horror. You fake paralyzed your son, the detective asked, his voice shaking with a mixture of disbelief and rage. You let this girl work herself to death. Let her take illegal medical trials that rotted her skin, while you lived in luxury? David couldn't answer. He had buried his face in his hands, his loud, pathetic wails echoing through the narrow, dirty alleyway. I floated above them, watching the spectacle. So that's why, I thought, a strange, hollow feeling expanding in my chest. Austin was never sick. They weren't poor. They were just playing. They were playing a game of poverty, and they used my life as the stakes. I looked down at my own ruined, rotting body. And I played my part so perfectly. The news broke the next morning, and it spread like a wildfire through the dry brush of high society. The billionaire's crucible, Vance shipping family staged decades-long poverty hoax, leading to daughter's tragic suicide. The headlines were merciless. The public, already hostile to the ultra-wealthy, reacted with absolute fury. Within 24 hours, the gates of the Vance mansion were surrounded by angry protesters, reporters, and news vans. The stock prices of Vance shipping began to plummet, losing billions in a matter of days. But inside the mansion, the silence was deafening. The wedding had been cancelled, of course. Clara's family had revoked the engagement within hours of the news breaking, desperate to distance themselves from the Vance name. In the grand dining room, the massive oak table was piled high with expensive food, lobster, prime rib, caviar, prepared by the estate's chefs. But no one touched it. David sat at the head of the table, his eyes bloodshot, staring at the wall. He hadn't shaved in 3 days. His expensive silk shirt was wrinkled, stained with coffee. Sarah sat opposite him, holding a small, pink woolen sock. It was a sock I had worn when I was 3 years old. She kept rubbing it against her cheek, whispering my name over and over again like a mantra. Austin sat in the corner, his knees pulled up to his chest. He was wearing the same clothes he had worn to the trailer park. He hadn't washed the mud off his shoes. Every time he looked at his own legs, he flinched, as if the mere sight of them standing upright was a physical torture. We have to do the funeral, David said, his voice hoarse. We have to bring her home. How? Sarah whispered, her voice hollow. The media, they're calling us murderers. They won't let us have a funeral. They'll throw stones at her casket. I don't care about the media. David suddenly roared, slamming his fist onto the table. The crystal glasses rattled, but the sound was empty. She's my daughter. She's my little girl. We did this for her. We did it so she would be strong. Why didn't she tell us she was sick? Why didn't she just ask for help? Because you taught her not to, Austin said from the corner. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a scalpel. David froze, looking at his son. You told her, since she was 5 years old, that if she asked for help, she was weak, Austin continued, his eyes hollow. You told her that a girl who relies on her family is a parasite. Remember when she dropped her ice cream when she was 6? She cried, and you told her that if she couldn't buy another one herself, she didn't deserve to eat sweets. She never asked us for a single thing. After that. Not a doll, not a dress, not a dime. Austin stood up, his legs shaking. He walked over to the table and picked up a silver fork, staring at his reflection in the polished metal. She thought we were starving, Dad. She thought I was going to die of some degenerative nerve disease. When she saw me struggling, she didn't see a lesson. She saw her family drowning. And because you taught her to be independent, she decided she would rather drown alone than drag us down with her. Sarah let out a choked sob, burying her face in the pink sock. We bought her the company, we bought the mansion, we were going to give it to her on her graduation. She's dead, Mom. Austin screamed, dropping the fork. It clattered loudly against a porcelain plate. She died with a trash bag over her head in a $500 trailer. She died thinking her body was rotting because she was a failure. She doesn't want your company. She doesn't want your pink dresses. I stood next to Austin, reaching out a translucent hand to touch his shoulder. Of course, my hand passed right through him. He shivered, rubbing his arms as if a sudden draft had entered the room. I don't hate you, Austin, I wanted to say. I just wish you had told me. I would have made you those boiled eggs anyway. I just wish I didn't have to die to find out you could walk. The next day, David and Sarah went to the medical clinic that had conducted the drug trials. They didn't go as the wealthy, powerful owners of Vance Shipping. They went with a team of high-priced lawyers, but when they arrived, the clinic was already closed, boarded up and surrounded by yellow police tape. The local authorities had raided it the night before, arresting the head doctor and 3 nurses for administering unregulated, highly toxic experimental drugs to desperate, impoverished people. But David used his money to do what he did best. He bought access. Within hours, they were in a private interrogation room at the precinct, looking at the lead nurse through a 2-way mirror. The detective who had investigated my death stood beside them, his arms crossed, his face expressionless. Her name was Chloe, David said to the detective. Tell me what she did there. Tell me everything. The detective sighed and flipped open a file. The clinic was testing a new synthetic immunosuppressant. It was highly unstable. They were paying $300 per trial, an astronomical amount for people living in the canal trailers. But the side effects were catastrophic. It caused rapid, necrotizing dermatitis. Basically, it killed the skin cells from the inside out. Sarah gasped, pressing her hands over her mouth. Most people stopped after the first dose, the detective continued, his voice flat. But your daughter, she kept coming back. The nurses said she begged them. They tried to turn her away when her arms started flaking, but she told them her brother needed a wheelchair. She told them her mother hadn't eaten a fresh vegetable in months. The detective looked directly at David. The nurse we arrested said Chloe would sit in the waiting room, shivering, bleeding through her long-sleeved shirts. But she would smile and tell them she was lucky. She said, my parents taught me. That hard work always pays off. I just have to work a little harder. David sank into a metal chair, his head between his knees. He looked as though he were aging 10 years with every second that passed. She was bleeding. Sarah whispered. Every time I swept her room. I thought it was just dust. I thought she was just messy. I saw the red stains on her sheets and I thought she had spilled juice. It was blood, ma'am, the detective said, his voice dropping into a chilling whisper. She was rotting alive. The autopsy showed that the infection had reached her bone marrow. Even if she hadn't put that bag over her head, she only had a few weeks left. She was in constant, agonizing pain. The coroner said the amount of pain she was in. It's a miracle she was even able to walk, let alone work 3 jobs. We did this, David whispered into the empty air. We killed her. We built the trap, and we baited it with our own fake misery. Yes, the detective agreed coldly. You did. When they returned to the mansion, the 3 of us, David, Sarah, and my ghost, walked up the stairs to the end of the hallway. David pushed open the door to the bedroom they had built for me. The room was bathed in the warm, golden light of the afternoon sun. The air smelled of fresh lavender and expensive wood polish. On the nightstand, the framed photo of the 4 of us stared back at them, a photo taken before the experiment began, when I was just a little girl holding a yellow balloon. The white tulle gown and the pastel pink dress were still hanging on the closet door, pristine and untouched. Sarah walked over to the bed, her fingers lightly brushing the soft high thread count pink sheets. This was the bed she had bought for me. She had spent weeks choosing the mattress, wanting to make sure her independent daughter would finally have a soft place to rest after her long years of struggle. But as Sarah looked at the bed, she suddenly began to tear the sheets off. No, 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 she screamed, ripping the expensive fabric, throwing the pillows across the room. It's too soft. It's too clean. She never got to sleep on it. She slept on a wooden cot with a single, moldy blanket. She slept on her own blood. Sarah, stop. David yelled, grabbing her by the waist. Let me go, she shrieked, fighting him with a strength she didn't know she possessed. We built this room for a ghost, David. We built a fairy tale for a corpse. She was wearing a trash bag. My beautiful girl died with trash on her face. They both collapsed onto the bare mattress, weeping, clutching each other like 2 shipwreck survivors drowning in a sea of gold. I floated over to the desk. I looked at my childhood trophies, the spelling bee medals, the perfect attendance certificates. They had saved all of them. They had cherished them. In their own twisted, sick way, they had loved me. They had wanted me to be the perfect, unbreakable heir to their empire. But they had forgotten that a diamond is only formed under pressure if it doesn't shatter first. And I was never a diamond. I was just a girl. I looked at the window. The white cat they had bought for me, the exact breed I had drawn in my notebook, was sitting on the sill, its green eyes fixed directly on me. It was the only living thing in the room that could see me. I walked over and gently stroked its head. The cat let out a soft purr, leaning into my translucent hand. Be good to them, I whispered to the cat. They're going to be very lonely now. They buried me on a rainy Tuesday. There was no grand ceremony. There were no high society guests, no floral arrangements from CEOs, no eulogies praising the Vance family legacy. The public outrage was too intense. The cemetery was kept secret, guarded by private security to prevent the press from desecrating the gravesite. Only 3 people stood beside the dark mahogany casket. David, Sarah, and Austin. They looked like ghosts themselves. Sarah's hair, usually perfectly coiffed, was matted and dry. David's eyes were vacant, staring into the open grave as if he were waiting for someone to push him in. Austin stood a few feet back. He had brought a small, rusted tin box, the one I had left under my cot. Inside was the $64,000 in blood money. As the priest spoke the final blessings, Austin stepped forward. He didn't throw a rose onto the casket. Instead, he opened the tin and poured the money onto the dark, polished wood. The wind caught some of the bills, sending them fluttering into the wet grass. But most of them landed with a soft, heavy thud against the lid. This is your money, Chloe, Austin whispered, his voice cracking. I'm not using it. I'm never going to walk without remembering what it cost. I'll run for you. I'll play for you. But I'll never touch a single dollar of this family's wealth again. He looked at his parents, his eyes filled with a quiet, dead coldness. I'm Leaving today. I'm moving to the north. I'm going to work in a factory. I'm going to eat what I can afford, and I'm going to wear what I can buy with my own hands. But I'm doing it because I want to, not because of some sick game. Sarah gasped, reaching out a hand. Austin, no. You can't leave us. We only. Have you left? No, Austin said, stepping back. You had Chloe. But you wanted a survivor, so. You got exactly what you deserved. You got nothing. He turned and walked away into the rain, his strides long, healthy, and heavy. He didn't look back. David and Sarah stood alone beside the grave as the machinery began to lower my body into the earth. The dirt fell with a hollow, rhythmic sound against the mahogany. Thud. 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 I floated beside my mother, watching her face. She looked so old. The diamonds in her ears looked like cold, hard tears that would never dry. We did it for you, Chloe, she whispered, her voice barely louder than the falling rain. We just wanted you to be independent. I know, I whispered back, though she couldn't hear me. And look at me now. I don't need anyone anymore. Years passed, but the ghost of Chloe Vance never left the mansion. I didn't stay because of anger. I didn't stay because of malice. I stayed because I had nowhere else to go. The world of the living had closed its doors to me, and the world of the dead was a vast, empty space that felt too cold. So I watched. I watched as Vance Shipping slowly collapsed, its assets sold off to competitors. As David lost the will to fight. He became a recluse, refusing to leave the mansion. The servants were all dismissed, one by one, until only the aging housekeeper remained. The grand dining room was never used again. The table remained covered in a thick layer of dust, the silver forks tarnished black. Sarah spent her days in my dream room. She would sit in the rocking chair by the window, holding the pastel pink dress against her chest, rocking back and forth for hours. She had stopped speaking to David. They lived in the same house, but they were like two planets orbiting a dead star, never touching, never speaking, bound only by the gravity of their shared guilt. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, Sarah would wake up screaming, clawing at her own arms, convinced that her skin was rotting away. David would run into the room, trying to hold her, but she would push him away, screaming that he was the doctor who had injected her daughter with poison. Austin never returned. He lived in a small, cramped apartment in a gray industrial city 3,000 miles away. He worked as a mechanic, his hands permanently stained with grease. His face tired but calm. He never played basketball again. The championship ring he had won was thrown into a river the day after my funeral. But sometimes, on rainy nights, he would sit by his window, looking out at the wet streets, and he would boil 2 eggs. He would put one on his plate, and one on the empty chair across from him. And he would sit there in the quiet, eating his dinner, pretending he wasn't alone. One evening, as the winter wind patterns howled against the glass of the mansion, David walked into my dream room. He looked at Sarah, who was staring blankly at the closet door. He walked over to the nightstand and picked up the framed photo of the 4 of us. We were so smart, weren't we, Sarah? David said, his voice a dry, rattling whisper. We thought we could control everything. We thought we could forge a human being in a furnace of our own making. Sarah didn't look at him. She just kept rocking, her fingers tracing the lace of the white tulle dress. We gave her everything she needed to survive, David continued, a single tear cutting through the dust on his cheek. Except the only thing that would have kept her alive. What was that? Sarah whispered, her voice like dry leaves. David placed the photo back on the table, his hand resting on my smiling 6-year-old face. Us. I floated between them, looking at their ruined, hollow faces. I felt no satisfaction. I felt no joy in their torment. I only felt a deep, profound pity. They had built a fortress of wealth to protect their children from the cruelties of the world, but in their arrogance, they had become the very monsters they were trying to guard against. I leaned down and pressed a cold, ghostly kiss against my mother's wrinkled forehead, and then against my father's graying hair. Goodbye, I whispered. For a brief moment, the wind outside seemed to die down. The room felt warm. Sarah stopped rocking, her eyes widening as she looked around the empty room, a faint, trembling hope flickering in her eyes. Chloe, she gasped. But I was already fading. The golden light of the bedroom began to dissolve into a soft, quiet white. The weight of my memories, the smell of the trailer, the pain of the rotting skin, and the hollow grief of my family, all of it began to drift away like smoke in a summer breeze. I turned my back on the golden cage, on the millions of dollars that had bought nothing but my death, and walked out into the quiet, beautiful dark. I was finally independent.